I think we offered it to the other person and that's what it is.
Okay.
He's like, I don't think so. I don't think I feel yet.
He's coming, but
Enrique, are we muted?
they have to go around, they can't.
Because they let out.
The February 25th, 2025 Forest Grove School District Budget Committee meeting is called to order at 5:31 p.m. If we could all rise for the flag salute, which is I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, welcome everybody. We are going to do introductions tonight, and we'll start. I think we'll just start up at the table with Director Cruz.
Eileen Klug, Director of Finance.
Suzanne West, Superintendent.
Paola Garcia, Student Representative.
Christy Kotke, Board Chair.
David Anderson, new appointee to the Budget Committee.
Mark Everett, Board Member.
Melinda Fisher, Budget Committee.
Nicholas Hoffax, Budget Committee.
Kate Grandesky, board member.
Jordan Miller, new appointee of the Budget Committee.
Valerie Ingram, Board Member.
Okay, and we're waiting to see if Pete Trax is going to be here. Brad is excused tonight, and we're missing Peter Bauer.
He's on his way.
Who is on his way. Perfect. All right, do I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And as outlined in the agenda, a focus for today is to receive nominations for the position of Budget Committee Chair. We will be opening the floor for each member to present their nominations, including a brief explanation of why you believe the nominee is qualified for this role. Please proceed now with any nominations. Don't be shy.
Okay, I'll nominate myself to be the Budget Committee Chair. Why? Because I know how to run a meeting very well.
I'm wondering, in the past, we've never had board members in that.
I know, but I feel like
You were the chair not that many years ago.
I have been, right? Or else the last. One of the two.
As the budget? You-
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
All right.
I just feel like sometimes the committee members might not want to do it because of the the laws of the public meeting law and just not knowing and such. So I don't mind doing it. It's just for a meeting.
Typically, it's one-on-one. We need a vice chair as well, and oftentimes that's a budget committee member who is the vice chair, or the other way around.
Well, I'll second that.
Okay, great, thanks.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Are there any other, we are going to vote on this. Any discussion?
If someone else really wants to do it, please feel free. Don't mind.
All right, I think seeing none, I will go ahead and do a roll call vote, or can I do all in favor? All right, I mean, we have a feeling. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. And Val, with joy, I'm going to bring this over to you.
So now I need to get to work.
Do the nominations for vice chair.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everybody for voting me as your Budget Committee Chair. Honored. Would anybody like to nominate themselves or anybody else for Vice Chair? I promise I'll try to come to most of the meetings, so you won't have to do really much. Any takers?
Well, I could be vice chair. How many meetings do we have in April?
Well, I think we want to have one-on-one. I guess
Okay. You know what, I'm not here in April, so we need somebody else.
I would nominate Jordan Miller for vice chair.
How do you feel about that, Jordan?
I think it would be a great learning experience. I'd be
Cool.
happy to do it.
Anybody
I'll
else?
second.
Okay, so Kate seconded. Oh, I'm the chair now. We'll go ahead and do a vote. All in favor of Jordan for Vice Chair of the Budget Committee? Say aye. Aye. Great. All opposed? Hearing none, we will go ahead and move on. Thanks, Jordan, appreciate you helping out with that. Okay, at this time, we're gonna turn it over to Eileen, who is gonna tell us all about Budget 101.
Welcome.
It's exciting stuff.
Tonight is really just to go over the budget process, budget committee roles, responsibilities, the calendar, give some historical data and information on how we budget and how we expend our funds. And then just kind of start the building blocks for the budget process. So kick off the year. This is one of 2 preliminary budget meetings. The next preliminary meeting is April 22nd. And then on May 8th, we'll have our first official meeting. And so May 8th is when the delivery of the budget message will be, the budget message and the proposed budget will be received. And then we'll have 2 optional meetings, May 15th and May 22nd for the discussion, the deliberation, and ultimately the approval of the budget from this committee. The goal would be to be finalized by that May 22nd so that we have time to do our board hearing and all of our requirements before June 30th. So that is our target. And then the stuff in gray is just July 1st is the first of the new year when this budget cycle starts, and we have to certify the taxes by July 7th with the county in order for us to do our tax collections.
Is the meeting time start at 5:30? Sorry, what is that? Yes, thanks.
So to start in on Budget Committee 101, just kind of an overview of Oregon budget law. Our Budget Committee is requirement of Oregon law, and it helps establish the standards, the practices for building the budget process. The budget document itself and the approval of the budget is an avenue of a way to control public spend. So it sets the max appropriation levels that we can expend for the course of the year. It is a way to outline our programs, our physical policies. It provides the justification for the imposition of property taxes, and a requirement of it is to encourage community involvement. And the community involvement is being a part of this budget committee process, and we have to have public hearing, allow public comment at least one or more of these meetings. So just a little bit about that. As far as the meeting requirements, all of our budget meetings are subject to public meetings law, and so we have to record them. We're all on the lovely owl tonight, and we do have to have 6 members voting yes to pass the budget, and we have to have at least 6 members here in order to conduct business. So it is really important that we have everybody here engaged and active. The next is the budget committee may request additional information, ask questions. We really do encourage you guys to look at what is proposed, the information, the process, and really dissect what is given to you guys. The budget itself does not become a public document until it is released on May 8th. So we will probably not, we'll give guidance, we'll talk about things we're hearing about, things we're listening to, and trying to build into the budget document, but the actual assumptions built into the document will be released on that date. Public comment, and then we do have to approve the document in order to assess taxes. The next slide is about budgeting and government. So your responsibilities as a budget committee, and here we have 3 different levels. We have the budget committee as a whole, that is all 10 of you, 11 of you, the equal members, board, and appointees. The budget committee's responsibility is really to receive the budget, review the budget, listen and consider the budget, dissect it, deliberate, ask questions, and then approve. The board is who sets goals and policies, and then administration is really responsible for drafting the budget, preparing the budget, based on the best information we have at that time. And then once May 8th happens, we are really an advisory group to you as a budget committee. So we can advise and support you through the final process. A quick quick reminder of what is not the budget committee's role. The budget committee itself does not set salaries or benefit levels, doesn't place specific staff or discuss individual employees, doesn't add or delete major programs, or develop policies. These are all items of the board or administration. What is a budget? The budget, when it's prepared, it is a financial plan based on a point in time. It is the best information we have, and it is subject to change. It may and it will most likely change. Salaries come in different. We are in open negotiations. The state school fund is gonna the legislative session will get finalized most likely after budget process. So there are changes that will happen, but it is a financial plan. It gives us the guardrails going into this next fiscal year. And then we will have probably adjustments that we have to make afterwards. Ultimately, at the end of the day, what we're looking at, this is a page from the budget book itself, so it's kind of small, but we're looking at setting maximum appropriation level by major fund and function. So when we talk fund, we're looking at the general fund, our grant funds, our nutrition services, or capital projects. So major funding source, major funding level. And then within each one of those buckets is the major function. So instruction versus support services versus capital improvements. So we're looking at setting the maximum appropriation by this breakout at the end of the day. Looking at our accounting structure, this is information that you'll see throughout the budget book when it is delivered to you guys. And the major funds are to the left, the major functions are in the middle, and then major objects are off to the right. And so our appropriation level is set by the first two groups, but in the budget document, you will see a lot of the third group. So we break everything out by major fund, function, and object. Once you have had time to discuss, deliberate, you've received the budget proposal, there's really 4 options at the end of the day. We can, as a budget committee, approve the budget as it's proposed. We can increase the appropriation amount if we think we're gonna get more funds. An example of that is if we build in a certain state school fund estimate into the budget and you believe as a committee it's gonna come in higher, so we're gonna increase our appropriation to support that. The alternative is if you think we have too much revenue built in for the state school fund, you can decrease the appropriation for that. The last one is moving between major funds and functions. So when we look at this slide, we can say, okay, general fund, support services is heavy. We want to move 500,000 from support services to instruction. And then at the end of the day, it's up to administration to figure out how to make that happen. All right, building the historical data and information. So we have last fiscal year, this is our last audited financials. We had $133 million worth of total resources, of which 61% was general fund. The rest is set aside for a specific purpose. General fund is our operating funds, so that's what's paying our general instruction, our teachers, our instructional aides. That's what pays the electricity, generally operates the buildings. Our restricted grants, which is 17.9% of the total resources, that is our IDA funds, our high school success, our SIA. So funds that we receive that we can only spend on a specific purpose that we have to keep outside of the general fund. Nutrition services is required to keep outside of all of the other funds. And then we have our debt services and our capital projects. Capital projects is where a lot of our bond expenditures are going to be. if we take that general fund out of that and look at it a little bit more deeply, 81 million of those resources was general fund. And then we have, within that, we have our property taxes, our county school fund, our common school fund, our state timber, and then our state school fund. And then there's 5% less. Everything other than that 5% is controlled by the state school fund formula and basically enrollment driven. Number of students we have and the demographics of those students. And that is, so if one goes up, the other one can go down. So if we receive more property taxes one year than the average in the state, then we might get a little less state school fund. Or if we receive less property taxes than the average, we might get a little bit more state school fund. So it's all, those kind of play on one another. The 5% is really what is district controlled. That's gonna be our interest, our rebates, student fees, all of those other things that are not enrollment driven. If we look at enrollments a little bit more, and enrollment compared to state school fund, there's a difference. We look and monitor enrollment constantly throughout the year. We project for the following year, but we actually get funded based on enrollment over the course of the year, our average daily membership, so average daily attendance through the year, and then we get additional weights for students with IEPs, students, ELL students, poverty, foster, pregnant, and parenting. And so you can see our enrollment at a particular time was 5,751 students, but we only got funded for 5,718 students because it's weighted for the course of the year. So it's not that we can look at, we have this many students today. We have to average it and look at it over the course. And then we get all of the additional weights. So we actually got funded for 7,191 weights. So it just kind of shows a little bit of a difference of looking at enrollment at a point in time and how that impacts our state school fund.
The point in time change, is that a designated point in time when they, is that an average when they eventually come back and say, okay, this is where you are? Or is that at the same point in time based on?
The point in time, so the enrollment one, that was just an October 1st enrollment number. The funded weights in orange, that is the average attendance, not average attendance, but average enrollment over the course of the year.
The whole year.
So it's not a kid was sick a day so we don't get funded, it's when they hit that 10-day drop, then they get dropped from our enrollment and that impacts our system. So it's a little complex.
Yeah, Eileen, the question is, do we have like a thing about the acronyms so that people know what they mean?
Sorry, last year's budget book is a list of acronyms, and so that's on the website, plus the very last slide we have for you today has some links, and the acronyms are in there too. So we'll have.
Will the new budget book have the acronyms?
The new budget book will have it in the back too. So,
Okay, you have that.
I don't have that on me.
And if you need to pause us to translate anything, please do.
Yes. Yeah, I was like, do you want to know a specific one right
Yeah.
now?
Not necessarily.
Can I see your picture?
What is P&P?
Right after this.
P&P, Eileen.
PNP, pregnant and parenting.
Okay, why don't you go through them all for us really quick?
Okay, pregnant, parenting, and then foster, poverty, ELL, English language learners, IEP is students with disabilities, and then ADMR is the average daily membership over the course of the year, and then the other one's the enrollment. The back of the budget book is a great resource. It's got a lot of things, but page 185 has all your acronyms.
Thank you.
No, please ask questions. And then when we look at how we spend our resources, last year we had $80.9 million of total expenditures, of which 75% of that was salaries and benefits. When we add sub-services in, because we have now moved to contracting sub-services, that increases it to 77%. Services and utilities, that 15.6 in green, that includes contracted services, custodial transportation, Any tuition fees that we have, so that has a lot of salaries and benefits in it, as if we were to have that in-house. So some districts have those in-house, some districts contract those services. So we are actually higher than that 75%, but some of those are embedded in that services grouping. If we look at how we expend our resources by major function, this is broken out by instruction on the bottom. Support services is the light green. 23-24, we expended 62% of our budget on instruction and 36% on support services. To talk a little bit about the difference of those two, instruction is everything that's directly related to the classroom. So that's going to be our classroom teachers, our instructional assistants, that direct classroom support. Everything in that support services bucket is going to be everything else. That's going to be those utilities. It's going to be the library aides. It's going to be our counselors. It's going to be our administrators, district office, maintenance. Everything else goes in that bucket. So that 62% for instruction is that direct classroom interaction. Historical ending fund balance. Ending fund balance is the difference of resources received for the course of the year and expenditures expended. So this is the funds that we have available to support the kickoff of the next year and to help, So over time, historically, we have budgeted between 8 and 10%, and then we end closer to 14%. So we budget low conservatively, and we end a little bit higher. You can see from 2021 that gap got bigger, and that's primarily from the pandemic. Expenditure trends changed. We had a lot of additional federal funds that we got for COVID. And we're trying to balance that back down, trying to get those closer again. It will take a couple of years as we start to get that aligned. We have probably one more year of a couple of carryover grants that we're using that is causing the gap to be a little bit bigger still today. But we will, over the next couple of years, get that closer in alignment. Last year, we ended at 21%. A little bit later, you'll see where we're projecting us to end this year.
Eileen, is the difference that constitutes the reserves effectively, I guess, right? When we're...
Our ending fund balance is basically the reserve for the following year. Our board policy is that we have to maintain at least an 8% ending fund balance, but there's no policy for the maximum. We want to budget closer to the 8%, and there's lots of years. We actually budget higher than the 8% because we know what's going to happen the following year, or there's uncertainties the year after that. So our budget is the line. So this year we actually budgeted 11.7%, depending on what we know and anticipate for the upcoming years and trying to balance that. But our current spending trend is deficit spending, so that is naturally going to come down in the next couple of years. Yeah.
I would just say too that other than many, many years ago, we haven't been in the news as much as other districts. So we do typically, we are sort of conservative, but we don't find ourselves in the situation that other districts do very often.
Good point. Okay, so a little bit about how we compare to like districts. So we can always look at how we spend our resources, but are we spending them in alignment with others our similar size, or similar demographics? And it gives us an idea of where we are compared to others. Are we out of alignment? When we're looking at district comparables, we look at districts that are similar size. So we have 5,700 students. We have to, in order to get enough districts like us, that range is fairly large. So we're looking plus or minus 3,000 students. The other thing we look at is additional weights, 5%. So Forest Grove is about 25% additional weights. And so we're looking for other districts that have similar weights, similar demographics as us. We could, if we look at just the first bullet point, Lake Oswego could be in there, but we are not a Lake Oswego. So this kind of helps us figure out and give us actual comparables that could mean something to us. And then the last one is really looking at geographics. Geographically, we can have the first two, but they're gonna be in Southern Oregon, or they're gonna be way over in Eastern Oregon. And so when we're looking at financial comparables, we might not completely align with that. So looking at that Portland metro area, I-5 corridor, I-84, within reason to Portland PDX. And so when we look at that, we have McMinnville, Centennial, Canby, Central, Oregon City, Corvallis, Newburgh, Silver Falls, Oregon Trail. And then there's the Hillsborough, Banks, Gaston, Tillamook, and Beaverton, our neighbors, to give comparisons for. And so sometimes we pull in our neighbors, sometimes we do both. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. And then this is the November 2024 class size report. This is all grades, all subjects. The median of all of our comparables is 24-1. We are at 23-1. And so we're slightly below the median, but you can kind of see where we are in comparison to our neighbors and our comparable districts on average class size based on the November report. Another way to look at our comparisons is where we land on how much we expend on instruction versus how much we expend on support services. And we, last year, had 62% of our budget spent on instruction, and the average was right at 60. So we're slightly above average on the funds and resources that we commit to instruction versus support services. This one's kind of ugly, but it's the same thing, just but by major objects: salaries, benefits, services, and supplies. And this one, I mentioned earlier that it's really hard because some districts contract services and some districts have them in-house. So this is where you'll see a lot more of that variability, just because if we have subs in-house and another district doesn't, it's gonna be on salaries column, whereas ours is gonna be on services. It's another perspective, another way to look at it, but we try to focus on the last one, instruction versus support services, because that's much more meaningful to us. Ending fund balance as a comparison. Another way to look at comparables to other districts, but again, there's always variability. We ended last year just over 20%, whereas other districts were unfortunately fairly low and some were higher. Every district has its own things that they have going on. They have their own issues. They have their own reserves in other areas. So a district could have a lower ending fund balance, but a reserve somewhere else. So it's one way to look at things, but it's not the end all. All right. Any questions before we go on? This has been a lot. Okay. Financial update. Typically, when we give a financial update, we'll give you the resources on top, expenditures in the middle, and then at the very bottom is your ending fund balance, 2 years of historical data, the current year's budget, current year's forecast is in the block, and then trying to compare it to the adopted budget and then compare it to the board report that I gave in October, so we can see how the changes happened and where it's happening at. If we look at the variance to budget column, our total resources is almost $2.6 million higher than what we had built into the budget. There's two big factors into this. One is our local resources. Interest revenue is staying fairly high. We continue to get more and more interest every month than what we had budgeted. part of it is because we've had to shift the way we are investing our resources. Historically, we have always just had all of our resources in our LGIP, our local government investment pool. But now that we have our bond funds, we can only have so much there. So now we have to take some of our general fund and some of our bond fund and invest them. It's generating significantly more resources than what we would get in a normal year. But it's because we can't hold those resources in our LGIP like we can.
Is there a cap on the absolute dollar amount that you can put in there, or?
There's a cap on the LGIP amount, correct? Yeah, so once we hit that, and because we have bond resources, we've exceeded that the last few years. So we'll keep watching the interest and maybe in the future keep doing some more investments depending on rates between the LGIP and our investment opportunities,
So are we just selecting our own investments to?
We hire Piper Sandler to help support us, and we have very strict rules on how we can invest. So it's all very secure, very, there's not a lot of risk in it. So, but we do hire a third party to do that for us and manage
You're
it.
doing well.
Yes, yes. So interest, and then the other part on that is our high school gym floor flooded last year, and so we had to get it replaced. You'll see down farther under expenditures, we had more expenditures under capital. So we have an increase in our revenue and an increase in our expenditure because of that insurance claim. And then the other one under resources is our beginning fund balance, where we budgeted and thought we were gonna end the year versus where we actually ended the year was $1.4 million difference. So our beginning fund balance increased because of that. A lot of that is, a good portion of that is utilizing grant funds that were expiring in creative ways that qualified for the grant so that we didn't leave any money on the table. As far as expenditures by major object, our salaries and benefits are about $1.3 million under budget for this year. A lot of that's turnover, it's vacancies. It does assume a little bit more continued grant utilization at the end of this current fiscal year based on what I'm seeing right now. But overall, we're looking at $3.7 million increase in our ending fund balance this year as compared to what we had built into our adopted budget, which is about 15%. But if you look at the bottom of the circle, it's still almost a $4 million deficit spending. So that's our beginning fund balance coming in and our projected ending fund balance. So we're utilizing about $4 million of that this current fiscal year. And I do have a mistype on this, so sorry, I just realized that as I was coming in here, it's 11.36 billion in the upper right corner. This is a projection of our ending fund balance for the upcoming several years. This is taking, if we currently spend and continue our current spending trends this year, next year, the following year, and project forward our enrollment based on flat funding, an $11.36 billion state school fund, build in a moderate COLA, step our PERS rate increases, so just doing some preliminary assumptions built into it. This is what our ending fund balance looks like over time. We're not gonna get it to where forever it's gonna be above that zero. But our goal is to try to push that out a little bit so that we can make incremental changes year over year, so we're not making any drastic changes. We can make a change, adjust, make a change, adjust a little bit. If we try to get that to hit an 8% ending fund balance forever, it will be really challenging. The other thing is we do budget conservatively a little bit, so you've seen that gap between our budget and our actual. This then allows us to be able to build that into the next year and use it so that we can keep modifying over time. But I think the big ticket item with this is we are in deficit spending, and we will have to make adjustments going into this budget season.
If the state school fund was not 11 and 0.3 and was 13, how close would we be to being able to ride that line? Or, and I'm throwing that number out only because that was a number just suggested by that last, just as a incentive for the state to consider,
I would have to
I mean, run it.
run it. But if you do increase the state school fund, the more you increase the state school fund, the more you're gonna take that line
Right.
and build it up. So, but I'd have to run that specifically.
To be clear, though, it won't resolve the problem.
No, I know,
We
yeah.
still are in a position where we need to tighten our belt. We are not, as Director Klug mentioned, in the situation similar to some districts around the state, but we're at a point where we need to be very careful with our resources.
Right.
All right, any other questions before I move on? Perfect. Budget considerations, things we're looking at. Right now, we're in the process of building the budget. We're gathering all of the data. We're running our enrollment estimates, our staffing projections going into next year. Getting feedback from our administrators, getting feedback from our programs and our directors to try to build the budget to figure, and then April we'll work primarily on balancing the budget. But the big things that we're looking at in this budget season and that are very high on our radar is the legislative session. The governor's recommended budget that came out in December was 11.36, so that's what we're starting with. We are in full bargaining and will be in full bargaining this spring with both FGA and OSEA, our licensed and classified union groups. So this budget will have an estimate for COLA in it, but it will most likely change because we probably won't have that set before we propose a budget. But it will have an estimate built into it. Our PERS rates are increasing this next biennium. So we will see a 4.4% increase in 4.4% of salaries increase in the next year for our PERS rates. And then just to have it on everybody's radar, in 2027, 2029 biennium, our PERS UAL rate credit, which is helping to bring down our PERS costs, will expire. And so that biennium, we will have a bump up in our PERS rate because we will no longer have that credit. So we are looking at our PERS reserves and trying to figure out how can we balance that and level that off so it's not a big impact right away. So we are looking not just at this next biennium, but we are looking another biennium ahead just so we can plan ahead.
I mean, what is the UAL stand for?
Unfunded actuarial liability. The next one is impact to Oregon paid family medical leave. This is our first year of it. We do have to increase our budget a little bit for the impact of it this year. Do believe that it is going to increase next year over and above this year. This year it's getting kickstarted, people are learning about it, and this is district funded. So,
Do you know how much it cost us this year?
I'd have to look again.
Maybe when you're looking at it, you can send me an email. I'm just curious.
We have both the costs of the insurance that we have to buy for it, and then we have the sub costs associated to all of the leave. So we ran it this fall, and it's on that legislative priority sheet that we had approved by the board. I just didn't bring it with me. Thank you. The next one is the impact of federal funding. At this time, we're moving forward with our budgets at flat funding for federal grants, but there is a lot of uncertainty there. And then the last one is our continued declining enrollment. We are declining in our enrollment, so we will be budgeting floor funding for enrollment because the state school fund formula has it has a greater of. So when you're in declining enrollment, it gives you the greater of the 2 years. So you have 1 year to kind of catch up for it. So we will be budgeting floor funding going into next year for that.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to cover the next few slides here and pause just for a moment to read into the record that Peter Bauer has joined us. So thank you for joining us, Peter. Good to see you. I want to talk a little bit about State of Oregon and legislative session. As Director Klute mentioned, the session is active right now. This is the long session, which means it's going to go all the way till June. When we are budgeting during a long session, that does present some complications for us in that we will be running our budget process and bringing forward to the budget committee our best estimate of what we think the state school fund budget will be. And more than likely, we will need to make adjustments. We will adopt a budget that then will require us to do some adjusting because it won't exactly match where the state legislature ends up. But the timeline is that February 26th and May 14th, we receive a revenue forecast. The revenue forecast on May 14th is a significant driver in determining what the state school fund is. That's why you see that there in green. In March, the co-chairs typically release their budget. So the process for budgeting at the state level, for those of us that pay attention to what takes place, is the governor proposes a budget. The legislators that we elect work with the governor's proposed budget, and then the co-chairs return their budget. Once the co-chairs return their budget, that's when the finagling really begins. That's when our legislators, along with advocates around the state, really push and mold and shape to arrive at a state school fund for the next biennium. And then on June 29th, the session closes. So based on the timeline that Director Klute showed earlier, we will be adopting a budget before the session closes. And that could create a little bit of a gap between knowing what the final number is. There are some hot topics around the budget that are important for us to watch, and we are watching them closely. The governor has proposed technical adjustments to the state school fund, specifically correcting some of the errors that have existed for a long time in the current service level calculation. Those adjustments are very important to us. In sum, it's about $600 million additional dollars based on, compared to the calculation as it would have sat last year. So that's really important to us, and we are working with the assumption that the governor's proposed budget will be the floor for that haggling that takes place after the co-chairs release their budget. In addition to that, there's a great deal of momentum around changes in the way special education is funded across the state. Specifically, there are 3 different efforts underway that we're monitoring closely. The first effort is high-cost disability reimbursement. Right now, for students with disabilities whose service requires a significant amount of resources, we're reimbursed up to $30,000 and then only a portion of the cost beyond that. So there are advocates who are working really hard to fully fund high-cost disability, and if not fully fund, at least raise the trust that funds the reimbursement to our school districts. In addition to that, the weight for students who receive special education services is capped at 11% across the state. The state average special education percent per district is about 15%. So right there you can see that there's a gap between what it costs to educate students versus what the state is providing to school districts to educate students who are receiving special education services. For our district, our percent is closer to about 17%, so our gap is even more significant. There's 2 different efforts underway. One is to completely lift the cap and fully fund the special education costs across the state. The other is to raise the cap, and the number that I hear being used most regularly is the 15%, which is our state average. Our state average matches the national average as well. And then the last thing that we're keeping a close eye on is there is a bill moving through the legislature right now specific to unemployment benefits for employees who strike. This would be new. Right now, employees who are striking cannot claim unemployment benefits. If this passes, that could be something that has a financial impact on school districts. There are a lot of people advocating for changes to the bill as it currently sits right now so that it doesn't impact anyone who's currently bargaining. because that could impact how those negotiations play out. And there are some other tweaks to the bill that people are advocating for that would be beneficial to schools and protect some of the resources that we might have to expend here. But the most important reason why we're keeping track of this, although this is a budget presentation, is that if you remove the incentive to stay at the table, which providing unemployment benefit insurance may do for some negotiations, then it is likely that a strike would be protracted, and that simply isn't good for kids. So there's a lot of people trying to shape this to make sure that it doesn't have an adverse impact on students. Next slide, please. So I mentioned already that we have quite a lot of policy and advocacy work taking place with the current long session. These are just some of the areas that there are work groups and advocacy groups across the state leaning into the bills that are being moved through our current session. As a school district, some of us here are involved in shaping that as well and providing testimony. But all of these different areas we are monitoring closely because they all have an impact on school funding. Sometimes it's hard to see that. Sometimes the legislature makes decisions where they don't realize that they are impacting schools. One of the most publicized examples of that is just recently there was a bill passed through our legislature that requires that all of these lights be changed to LED lights. For a district our size, that's $1 million cost, and that's not funded. That's not any kind of increase that we would have seen in the state school fund. That would be $1 million that we would not be investing in students were we to do that today. So that's why we lean into this work and why we advocate in the areas where we feel like we need to shape the conversation. We advanced some legislative priorities just a couple months ago as a school board and as a school district. Other groups are doing that as well. COSA, which is the Coalition of Oregon School Administrators, OSBA, which is the Oregon School Board Association, OASBO, which are all financial officers around the state. So there's a lot of advocacy groups that are watching this closely. Okay, and then this last slide here is one I've shown in the boardroom recently. I want to orient you to what you're seeing here. Director Clute has already mentioned that we have declining enrollment. What you're looking at here, if we start with the blue line is our enrollment decline from the 2015-16 school year. So that's our starting point, the 15-16 school year. And what you see is that enrollment has been slightly dropping in the few years following school year 15-16. Then the pandemic hit and it dropped significantly, and we haven't recovered. So we still have a significant decline in enrollment compared to where we were just a decade ago. When Director Clute talked about how enrollment matters to the budget process, our funding is based on our enrollment. So these numbers are catching up to us now. One of the considerations that we need to pay attention to for our school district is that while enrollment has declined, the amount of staff that we have hired has increased. Now that initial increase in staff was due to the pandemic, and you can look at any school district across the state and you would see a similar escalation in the number of staff. We refer to that as FTE, full-time equivalency. But after we came out of the pandemic, as a school district, we didn't adjust. So enrollment stayed low and we continued to add staff. We're at a point now where that's caught up with us and we need to start to right size the discrepancy between the increase in staff and the decline in enrollment. Now, what the decline in enrollment has done, coupled with that increase in staff, is you can see that students per FTE has continued to decline since the 15-16 school year. That is strictly a function of less students and more adults. So before I pitch it back to Director Clute, do you have any questions about those slides?
What were the factors that drove the significant step up in FTEs when the pandemic hit?
Yeah, it's a great question. For those of us who worked in schools at the time, you'll remember some of the things I'm going to put in the room here. When we came back in a hybrid fashion. for most school districts, I wasn't in Forest Grove at the time, but I'm assuming it was also true. We had kids on a rotation basis, so we needed more staff to take care of the health and safety needs that were required for, gosh, the better part of 18 months, I think it was, in our schools. We had to bring in health staff into our offices. We were required for a period of time to offer COVID tests to our students, to our staff. So we needed additional staff to work on that. The increase in requirements that we had to manage as a school system was pretty significant during those early months of the pandemic. Then when we came back full-time, I believe this was true in Forest Grove as well, based on what I've heard, we were confronted with two things. One, the realization that the pandemic and learning online was not good for anyone. That was just generally not a period of time where we saw the kind of growth that we would expect for a full year of school. So we had a lot of catch-up that we needed to do there. The other thing that we all experienced, which I don't think we expected and responded to with additional FTE, is that students lost a very important social development year. And they came back dysregulated. They came back without the year of social development that would have positioned them well for the grade that they entered into. A lot of dysregulation, a lot of peer interactions that were problematic. And the way that most school districts attempted to address that, Forest Grove included, was to bring in additional staff so that we could provide more support to students. And I'll pause there, Director Clute, I wasn't in the district during the pandemic, so is there anything you want to add to that?
No, just thinking of the FTE increase from 2015-16 to current, it is just that our average class sizes are much lower than they were prior. We do have more instructional assistants across the board, more counseling, like we have a significant amount of additional resources and supports in the buildings and at the district than we had back then, so.
Follow-up question for you. I know that for municipalities, there was a lot of money started flowing from Washington down to try and offset the impact of the pandemic. Was that something that occurred in school districts as well?
Yes, ESSER is an acronym that many people are familiar with. That was the Emergency Relief Fund issued by the federal government. There were actually 3 different grants over the course of the pandemic that were issued. And just this past year was the final expiration date for the last grant. My understanding, and I'll ask Director Clute to fill in any gaps here, is that while some of that money was used certainly for additional staff, it wasn't a significant amount. Most of the resources that this district received were moved towards one-time expenses. Some of those were the health and safety requirements that were early on in the pandemic, like masks and hand sanitizer and door labels and those sorts of things. But also some really important changes that needed to be made to air circulation. So HVAC systems were updated to ensure that we have the proper air circulation occurring in our learning spaces. Anything you want to add to that?
The largest source of all of our federal funds that we got through the pandemic was HVAC related, or air filter changes. We did have health aides and a couple of licensed FTE and some intervention funds, some of which have been embedded back into the general fund budget or absorbed back into that, and some of which we no longer have anymore. So,
Thank you.
You're welcome. Director Clute.
all right. So I talked a little bit about this earlier, but where we are in the process this month, February and March, is really about us gathering data, gathering information, having conversations, working with our department heads, figuring out what all the needs are across the district and building that budget. In April, our focus administratively, internally, is really going to be around balancing the budget. And then you will get the budget proposed in May. And then again, the last one is throughout will be through negotiations. So I think at this point, we'll just have an estimate built into the budget, and then we'll have to go from there. So. And the last one is just the resources. I'll send this information out to everybody, but these are just links that might be helpful, especially to newer budget committee members that haven't been through the process. The Oregon Program Budgeting and Accounting Manual, that's our PBAM. That is the required way that we have to code all of our expenditures so that we're consistent across the state. The 24-25 adopted budget, all of the prior year's budget presentation materials, if you guys want to dig in and go to sleep. The PBAM might make you do that. Oregon Budget Law, Budget Manual, OSBA Handbook, the current year's calendar, and then again, that acronyms. So it's there if you want it. Otherwise, I am definitely here just for a one-on-one conversation if you guys have any questions. I want to be able to help support you guys through the process, and yeah, that is it.
Do you guys have any other questions for Dr. West or Director Clute? Okay, seeing and hearing none, there will be no further business. The meeting is adjourned at 6:26 p.m. and the next meeting is April 22nd. See you all then. Thanks, guys.
Well, I've been taken on.
Christie has honors, so that's.
It's on mine.
They were very adamant that they had to be.
The February 25th, 2025 Forest Grove School District Board of Directors meeting is called to order at 6:35 PM. We'll start with the roll call of board members present. Val? Here. I am here. Brad is absent tonight. Mark? Here. Kate? Here. And Paula? Here. Well, if we can ask everybody to rise for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I'm looking for a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
So moved.
I'll second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And we'll start with the student representative report. Paula, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So on February 20th, Belinda and I, she's the ASB Vice President, we attended the Mariachi Tradicion concert at the high school. It was a great performance like always, but they did mention some future dates. So May 9th, they will be hosting a Mother's Day concert, and May 31st is when they will be celebrating their 10th anniversary of the Mariachi program. So looking forward to attending those. Jam the Gym was successfully hosted on February 18th. And then just some other projects that ASB representatives are working on are just developing a Unity Week for our high school, creating monthly awareness campaigns, and for March, I believe the focus will be on Women's History Month. Also, just to give you guys an update on ASB elections, they are going smoothly so far. Based on the current timeline, they are scheduled to be completed the week after spring break, as long as everything stays on track. And then just a couple of other events going on at the high school. The Island of Dr. Moreau Play will have performances on February 28th and March 1st at 7 p.m. and then March 2nd at 2 p.m. Both boys and girls basketball have a game tonight at Newburgh, and they will also have games at home this Thursday. For wrestling, for both Kennedy Clayton and Renee Cook were named regional champions. For bowling, the bowling team alongside Liberty became the 2025 team state champions. The dance team brought second place in both pom and hip hop, and our cheer team also brought home second place at their last competition. And that is all I have.
Congratulations. The crowd is excited tonight about that. They've been doing a nice job too in the paper of highlighting those teams and their accomplishments. Okay, for board report I'm going to talk a little bit about some kids, student things first, and then I'm going to talk a little politics. I would like to go, I think the first slide, I wanted to talk about this, the circle that you see. And I know there's some people in our audience tonight that usually aren't at school board meetings, but we talk a lot about, when we talk about instruction, the kinds of students that we're wanting to help. We want students to have traits when they leave high school now, especially in this world, to be able to have choices. We talk about this, a choice-filled life. But when I really started thinking about the critical thinker piece and the communicator piece, there were a couple things that happened this week that I just wanted to share that I thought were really great. I mean, one was I did attend the Jam the Gym as well, and I want to compliment, I saw the third quarter of, I believe it was the JV girls team, and one of the things I really appreciated about that team is I don't remember the teams when I was in high school hustling that much consistently, but it felt like their defensive takeaways on every end of the court, and they're never giving up. But really the teamwork that you see where, when kids are littler and they go down and they just shoot the ball, but as they grow and they understand the team, watching those girls really share the ball and appreciate where the strengths were on that team was really great. And then I went across the gym for the rest of I think it was varsity boys, and I didn't know this, but I sat in the section with apparently, I think it might have been the 5th and 6th grade basketball teams. I thought it was the adults, but it turned out it was just the coaches. So a shout out and appreciation to parents and coaches who really were helping that group of boys who were the best cheering section I've seen, really like kind of sneak over and say, okay, that was a little bit much. We're gonna bring it down a notch, or we need to be respectful. And I really appreciated watching the crowd interact, and the team itself that was apparently down before I got there by quite a bit and ended up fighting and fighting and fighting and coming back at the end and winning in overtime. And it was just actually a really hopeful metaphor for the times we're in right now. I just really appreciated that part. So, but the other piece there is we had to have a plumber come to our house last week because someone may or may not have put a nail into the main water line at our house, and I'm not going to take that any further. But this plumber had to come out as an emergency, and it was a really young guy. It was a kid in my eyes, and he spent about 25 minutes kind of working through what was going on, and his engagement with me as a professional was really noticeable. And I think when we got to the end of our experience and he was leaving, I complimented him and said, you know, you really have amazing customer service skills, and where do you get that? And he said, well, I don't know if you've heard about this program called Avid. And I said, well, I have taught Avid a long time ago, but he talked about his Avid teacher and his experience in the classroom, and how his teacher would have him do these speeches and make him engage with other students and have those conversations that were really awkward, and how between that and his parents really pushing him, those are the skills that he was bringing to this job. And I just think when you see how that plays out, and you see what we're hearing from employers too, is they don't just want the skills, they want the person and the human. And it was just a wonderful experience. And so a reminder for the teachers out there that the work you're doing with those kind of soft skills, but the work that we talk about up there about communicator, that was a great example. But probably my favorite example was a language arts teacher who shared that her students were reading a novel in middle school. And as we know, novels have themes, and then a lot of teachers now are working to have kids work partner shares, and we're doing claim evidence and reasoning, and we're teaching kids to make a claim and back it up with evidence and then explain your reasoning, and then practice that with a partner. And these two boys were having this conversation, and she was wandering and hearing them talk about this theme and this character in the book. And one of the boys, they're friends, but they're different kids, but they've become friends in middle school. And one of the boys she overheard saying, well, yeah, but you know, I'm a Republican. And the other boy said, well, he said, don't you think we might be a little young to be labeling ourselves? We're just kids. And I just loved that story as a teacher to hear the critical thinking of middle school kids, to be able to be trying out those ideas and then talking with each other about what that means, and being able to have like a mature, respectful conversation. Again, it's those pieces in school, it's the things that we're trying to teach the kids. And as I kind of just segue into the politics part of it, which sits with us up at the board, last night I read the news at night, and one of the communications I saw came out last night at 11, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope this was just maybe something that wasn't accurate, but it was a communication from our current president from the White House account, and it involved name calling, and it involved a tone that was completely inappropriate, that would never be something that we would be putting out as board members, as teachers, as parents in this community. And it's hard, I think, if we can remember that teachers are trying to show our kids what it looks like. And as adults, I think this community does such a good job of setting that bar so high of we're not going to be doing those pieces, no matter what political party you are in. And so it's really making me reflect on the importance of creating students now who see each other respectfully and can respond in an appropriate way, and just trying to have the conversation of why they might not be seeing that happen with adults. But I think we were talking about it budget before the budget. We feel like the adults in this community do a really, really good job of being respectful and being able to disagree. And I just wanted to say that piece. The next piece I'm going to talk about, with that being said, examples of that. Actually, this is the advocacy letter. We talked in the budget meeting just earlier about advocacy. We've been doing especially around sped cap, which is the real focus of a lot of the elected leaders now. And our district was able to submit this letter, which is supportive of a couple different bills that are in the House right now. One is funding high-cost disability, one is the special ed funding, and one is adequately funding early education and early intervention. And so that's just an example of what our board has worked on that and the conversations that we're having around that with people at the legislature. Even today, we're being really active. But the other things I think we've been doing, I'll go to the last one. I've been thinking about 5 things that I've accomplished and that our board has accomplished this week. Just for some reason, our board does a really great job of working together, especially during legislative session, and making sure that we are getting our numbers into our legislators. Janine Solomon is one of them, so that she can use those facts from Forest Grove when she's advocating for bills in her Ways and Means committee. And so Dr. West and Kate and I went to the Ron Wyden Town Hall. I was able to go to the Suzanne Bonamici Town Hall, and she had a meeting before with elected official school board chairs, and we were able to talk with her about what's happening in our schools. And we also advocated with Mayor Beatty for more frequent communication, because we feel like we're gonna need to know weekly where things stand, and especially with schools, making sure that we're sharing what our needs are and hearing what the current issues are as far as funding goes. So we're active with that. I'm meeting with Rep. McLean on Saturday to have a conversation. Dr. West and I are attending the gala on Friday with Senator Solomon. So I feel very good about the relationships that we've all built with our legislators, and just for the community to kind of hear the level of engagement that we have, and that we're making sure Forest Grove's examples are helping other districts, and we're hearing that as well. And at Senator Solomon's, and I'll end with this, there were a couple things that happened of significance. There's several questions about schools, as we heard at Rep. McLean's town hall, as we heard at Wyden's town hall, and also Bonamici's, lots of questions about what's happening with schools. But there was a gal that stood up there at the end of the table, and she stood up, and she was from Guatemala. And she stood up to say, I just wanted to come to this community conversation, and I wanted to tell people at this table that you don't need to be afraid of me and my daughter. And again, coming back to the human aspect of all this, and just reminding all of us that we are all human beings and we're all trying to work together. It was a very powerful moment. She found a lot of support at that table. That's a bipartisan group of community members, because I know many of them, and I do think it's hard with politics to sort of talk about where we are with politics, but I think we only do that by practicing talking about it. So it was very informative. Senator Solomon's working on several bills, some of which we are supportive of as a board, a couple of which we have some adjustments we'd like to make so we can support our schools, but she's been a great partner in listening to us and reaching out and making sure that she's sharing what our needs are. So that was quite a bit, as usual, but there has been quite a bit going on. So if anyone has questions about any of all that, have comments about it, our emails are always available. We're very available for people to let us know what you'd like us to be talking about or working on or anything. So that's it. Guys.
Thank you for all you do.
It's all we're doing, but I mean, yeah.
But I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Okay, I have a superintendent report to make that I am going to cut short, because a lot of what I was going to say has already been said. Where I want to pick up is with some upcoming events that weren't already mentioned. 6 March, next week, there is a Belonging Summit at Neil Armstrong Middle School. I am super jazzed about this. It starts at 5 p.m. on the evening of 6 March, and there will be all sorts of breakout sessions focused for students and their families, community members are welcome. In addition, even if you don't have a child in our school, the focus is on how to create pro-social behaviors in your teens, how to keep your teens safe online, how to monitor their activity in a way that is supportive and not necessarily cloying like every teenager feels of their parents, to provide both parents and students a forum to learn a little bit more about how to navigate what can really be tumultuous years. And then you add on the phones that we all keep in our pockets and the relationships that they're trying to learn how to engage in. It can be really messy. So this is an opportunity to bring folks together to do some shared learning and to strengthen what it looks like for students and families to engage in our schools. So please join us.
Dr. West, real quick, I thought I read on the flyer that childcare would be provided. Can you confirm that?
Correct, yes. Childcare will be provided. So if people want to attend who have young students or even toddlers and you don't want to take them with you through the different sessions, we have childcare. There will also be a food cart on site so that we'll be able, if you're hungry, we'll have food there. So we want to make sure that people are able to attend and that there are not barriers.
Great, thank you.
A couple of other reminders. The week of 19 and 20 March, we have conferences. So if that's not already on your radar, it should be. That means that we'll have some students that are not in school. And of course, March, spring break is right around the corner. And that's the 21st and 28th of March. So make sure you're marking that as well. So just a couple of other comments. I also was at Jam the Gym. It was my first attendance and it was tremendous fun. I made a note here that our athletes performed incredibly well. And one of the things that I was most struck with was the sportsmanship. That our athletes were intense, they were playing hard, but they were playing fair, and at the end of the game, everybody paused and they acknowledged the hard work on the court. And I really appreciated seeing that from our athletes. I also have been visiting several classrooms over the past few weeks, and similar to what was shared by Chair Kotke, one of the classrooms that I visited, the students were deeply engaged in examining Gallup poll data. They were picking an issue that was of interest to them, they were curious about, they went to the Gallup poll site and they were looking at, well, what do my fellow Americans think of this issue? And they were disaggregating data by a lot of different variables like region, gender, their social status in terms of their incomes, their ethnicity, I mean, all sorts of factors. It was great, and the kids were in it. They were in it in a way, if you've ever been a teacher, where you have that moment where they are quiet and they are whispering to each other, they were working in partners, they were in it. And it was a magical moment. And what I realized from talking with the teacher and from overhearing, eavesdropping on some of the students, this lesson that they were engaged in was certainly teaching how to have constructive discourse and have differing opinions, but still have a respectful conversation. But what I heard from several students that struck me was curiosity. So they may have a different opinion, but they were pausing and they were asking questions like, well, tell me why you think that. And really trying to listen to each other and listen to understand. And I left that classroom feeling inspired, first and foremost. But secondary to that, I left with this passion that has been living in me since that experience, that we need more of that. We want to see and we want to protect those opportunities for our young people to develop curiosity, not just about the world they're inheriting and what they're learning, but about each other. And I think that will go a long way towards the types of relationships that we've been talking about that we want to have in our communities and with our neighbors. So a couple of other quick things. Last year, I think this is really interesting for the board to know, and certainly for anybody who's watching. Last year, Oregon Senate Bill 1552 passed, and it ordered the state to conduct an evaluation of the quality education model. They contracted with AIR, which is a research institute, American Institutes for Research, and they took a year to evaluate the QAM. The report was returned just in the last couple of weeks, and it's really interesting. It's long, it's like 300 pages, so unless you're really into research, I don't recommend you go through all of it. But there are some summary pages that are worth paying attention to. What I want to elevate from that research are a couple of big ideas that I think are important for us to hold on to as we engage in advocacy during this legislative session. First and foremost, AIR suggests that the QEM model is in fact adequate and that we should be funding to that level, but it's appropriate for the type of education that we have said as Oregonians that we would like our students to have. Second to that is they did an analysis of what we're currently spending per pupil. And they put forth that if we wanted to raise academic outcomes for students by 1 standard deviation, by 1 factor, we would need an additional $5,074 per pupil. So that is significantly more than the state is currently spending. They conducted a secondary analysis alongside that, and they added in what would it cost the state if the state assumed some of the capital needs that our school districts are struggling with across the state. I mentioned a few weeks ago the state is undertaking a survey of all the districts to figure out what the capital needs are. What the American Institutes for Research said is that based on what we know about the condition of our schools across the state would have to spend an additional $9,000 per student just to bring our buildings up to the state that we would want them in, the condition that we would want them in. So I'm bringing this forward because there's a lot of debate about the QEM. Is it valid, is it not? According to the American Institutes for Research, it works. It's a good model, and the state should be funding to that level. So as we advocate in these coming months for the technical adjustments that the governor put forth, I think holding this side by side with that and knowing that those technical adjustments are just the first step in ensuring that we have adequate funding for the state. I also want to put forth briefly, we talked a little bit about some legislative matters during the budget meeting we had previously that we are monitoring closely. House Bill 2248, House Bill 2953, and House Bill 2682 all deal with increases in revenues for special education services. All of those have moved out of the Education Committee, and they are now with the House Revenue Department, Revenue Committee. That's good news. It means that it's advancing through the process, so we're excited about that. And I'll continue to bring updates to legislation as bills advance. And that's all I have.
Any questions? I think I'd like to add one thing to that about the legislative bills. It was talked about in the budget committee is the Bill 916 about the unemployment. I can't remember the title of it off the top of my head, but I did.
I don't have the exact title, but it is Senate Bill 916.
It's Senate Bill 916, and in a nutshell right now, it's a bill that I might need some help with how I'm going to phrase this, but basically it would, for school districts, if employees were to be out on strike, school districts would be, we would be paying for the unemployment benefits. Now, what gets tricky about that bill, and I was able to have a conversation with Senator Solon about that, and there's been multiple school board chairs who have been working with their boards, because currently right now there's a statute. One of the conversations I was able to have with a school board member was this bill in particular is a bill being sponsored by AFL-CIO, and it's their big bill for unions, and I think we've all been watching the Providence strike and what's been happening with that. Well, part of this bill didn't take into account an existing statute around back pay. So when it comes to schools in particular, there's pieces of that bill that would make it really difficult and maybe impossible for school budgets to be able to pay for that. So one of the things we talked about with senators and multiple senators is the unfunded mandates. If that bill were to pass, there's a statute in that bill that prevents school districts from being able to make that up with back pay. I don't know that that's been communicated yet. There's multiple other pieces to that bill like that schools are gonna need to take into account and are actively kind of now advocating back to our senators to say, hey, we support, you know, the collective action of all of these pieces, but let me tell you what that would look like in our school district currently unless that statute is adjusted. So some of the conversation now is around if that bill moves forward, and that would be in Senator Solman's committee, making considerations for exempting schools temporarily from that or for changing some pieces to the school piece so that it's workable for districts and budgets. There's more to that. I know we've all been paying attention to that, but I did want to sort of bring that up as well because that's a pretty high interest conversation that we'll continue to have and would like to continue to have. So as it goes forward, there's lots of nuance to it. So
Yeah, thank you for that.
yeah.
I'd like to make a comment too, it's been very interesting to see and learn about the mandates that the legislators, they're great ideas, they're wonderful ideas, they have the best interest, but one of them that's come forward is coding. Coding's great, we love to see our high school kids have coding. But what they're proposing is that coding would be taught by our teachers K through 12. Well, if there's no, where does the money come, you know, for the teachers to incorporate that within their classroom? And where is the professional development? And again, you're asking schools to do more and more with no funding, and that is a real big problem. Forest Grove School Day is probably the smallest school day. When I went to school, we started school at 8 o'clock in the morning until 3:30. Well, now you know what our days are right now, and the teachers are really working very, very hard, but something has to give in the day. I mean, there's all these mandates that come that do not have dollar amounts with them. And they're great ideas, we would love to have them, but there's only so much, and our focus needs to be on what Chrissy was talking about, you know, that we have relationships and that we communicate, that we're working on reading and math, and our electives, you know, like our Viking House and these other things at the high school, the CTE, those are really, really important, and we have partnerships with that. But the legislators don't seem to know, you know, they put out the bill, but they don't really understand the ramifications if there's no dollars with that. That once it becomes a law, then we have to do something. And where does that money come? And it comes from, it's being taken away from our students and what we need in the classroom. So I encourage, you know, everyone here and anyone listening is, you know, please write letters, please become really engaged, because we need all of you to help us in making sure we get the dollars amount we need for our students and teachers.
And I think that's 2 meetings ago, we used that computer science bill as an example to show what it would cost our district should that bill go forward. We've had those conversations already. I will say, Kate, that since that conversation, which we then sent to the Ways and Means Committee, there were people on that committee that said they actually watched that conversation and it was eye-opening, and I think that really stuck. I just think those legislators aren't having direct conversations yet, and what's happened just in those last 2 weeks that I feel like a wheel has started to move and they're starting to get it. So again, I agree with Kate, the intention is good. Computer science bill in a K-12, every K-12 classroom, which is a part of a larger state plan, that is great, but let us show you how that isn't going to fly right this second and why, and then what are the ways that we are making that happen, or what's in Forest Grove, we'd maybe like to see more flexibility so we can have different types of CTE programs instead of a bill that dictates a certain programs. But I mean, I feel hopeful that we are now having those conversations, and I would encourage anyone, if you are hearing about a bill like that, to communicate with us and see, like, what have you heard right now? And those are questions that we can elevate. But I also think sometimes what people hear about bills isn't what the bill may be. And as we know, the bill is literally changing from day to day based on these conversations. So I feel very good about our local relationships, that it's having an impact, but we do need to hear those questions and support from everybody. Thanks, Kate. That's a good point. Okay. I know where we are. Okay, we are Forest Grove Education Association report. I did not see Diana here tonight. Do we?
We don't have any comment today.
No comment today? Okay, thank you, thank you. We are up to unscheduled public appearance. The board appreciates community members sharing information during public comments. Public comments can be made in person or submitted through the designated form on the webpage to be read by district staff or registered Zoom participants who indicated through the form they wanted to provide their comment live. Public comments will be limited to 3 minutes as a protocol for board meetings. Board members will not comment or respond to questions. Public criticism or complaints about the school district personnel are not allowed. And tonight we have 3 public comment. And so I'm gonna ask the first person to come up. I believe it's Jasenia. Is it Sormead? Sormead. And so I'll have Jasenia come up to the microphone there, which I believe is on, and I think I'm gonna ask you to introduce yourself and an address.
So name, address, and topic.
Name, address, and topic.
Yeah, my name is Justinian Sorweed, and I live at 2015 Main Street, apartment 1.
And Jasenia, could I ask you this, it works fine just like that? Okay, thank you.
Does this work?
I think so, yeah,
Right,
thank
okay.
you.
2015 Main Street, apartment 1, Forest Grove, Oregon. All right, so my name is Justinian Sorweed, and I'm here, did my 10th right?
Go for it.
Okay, so I'm here to represent the ELD department at the Forest Grove High School. And I just wanted to say to everybody, bienvenidos a todos, welcome everybody to our school board meeting. And we, the teachers of the ELD department at Forest Grove High School, enthusiastically recommend Brian Burke for the position of principal. Brian has been supervising our department this year, and we have been consistently impressed by his leadership qualities, his dedication to our students, and his commitment to support our work as teachers in ELD program as we expand and evolve into more integrated approaches for language. Brian has consistently created opportunities for our department, as well as world language department and various content teachers to be involved with the expansion and diversification of the dual language program in Forest Grove School District at the high school level. We are all learning and collaborating together to understand best practices and program models that will work best for our population in Forest Grove. He understands the unique needs of our students and advocates for resources and programs that will help them thrive. He values linguistic diversity and recognizes the importance of creating an inclusive environment where all students feel supported and celebrated. One of Brian's greatest strengths is his approach to working with teachers. He genuinely sees us as the experts in our field and treats us with respect and trust. I have 3 quotes. This is from Anayeli Manriquez Gonzalez. As a former student, teacher, and current educator at Forest Grove High School, Brian Burke has been nothing but a great advocate, supporter, and mentor during my journey through a system that was not built for people who look like me. He taught me that there can be a place where we can successfully fulfill our desires to be great educators while also improving our students' quality of education. And Edison Cabrera Manalo wrote, as a new teacher, Brian provides essential feedback that I need to improve that I need in order to improve my instructional practices and classroom management practices. He does not come in as just an evaluator, but also as a guide for new faculty members like myself. He has a commanding presence and a calm demeanor that I want to emulate in my classroom. And then I wrote, Brian is a great boss. In the past, I have worked for helicopter supervisors, but Brian is so grounded. He is there when I need questions, answers, but he gives me the space to make my own stylistic teaching choices, and he encourages me to use my experience and expertise as an educator. He has always made me feel that my input is valuable. If it's the perfect candidate that you're after, look no further. He's right here.
Right on time, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Next is Laura Lewis.
Hi guys. Hi. Good to see you. I'm gonna sit. You were brave standing the whole time. Hi. My name is Laura Lewis. I live at 3254 Barnett Street in Forest Grove, 97116. Does my time start?
And your topic?
Oh, Brian Burke, principal.
We can start now.
Cool. Hi guys, my name is Laura Lewis. I've been teaching at Forest Grove High School for 20 years. I also graduated from Forest Grove High School, and I have a son who will be attending Forest Grove High School in a couple years as well. Maybe 10 years, 12 years, I don't know how long he's going to be in elementary. And we're here to support Brian Burke for the position of principal. We know that the vacancy was posted and scheduled to close on February 15th. And our understanding is that Brian did submit his completed application prior to the closing of the application window. And I think when the window reopened, it signaled to us that maybe as a staff, we need to be a little bit more vocal about our direct support for Brian Burke. I'll be reading the second of 5 letters written by staff members at the high school, totaling about 100 signatures of our 140 staff members. It is with absolute confidence that we write this letter of support to recommend Brian Burke for the position of principal at Forest Grove High School. We, the undersigned, feel strongly in our assertion that Mr. Burke is not only deserving of the position, but essential to the future success of Forest Grove High School. It's evident from his 14 years of experience as assistant principal that he consistently demonstrates a student-first perspective in all of his decision-making. He understands that the needs of our students must always come first, while also valuing and supporting other stakeholders, including staff, faculty, and parents. His ability to balance these sometimes competing priorities showcases his exceptional leadership qualities. Furthermore, he is deeply focused on issues of equity and fairness. He celebrates our diversity and consistently seeks to create an inclusive environment where every student has the opportunity to succeed. One of Brian's standout skills is his approach to conflict resolution. He resolves issues with the utmost respect, compassion, and a strong commitment to restorative justice. This ability not only fosters a positive environment in our school, but also builds trust among all members of our community. He engages students, staff, and families in dialogue that leads to healing and growth, a vital skill in today's diverse educational landscape. In addition to conflict resolution, Brian is an excellent problem solver, which is crucial for any leadership role. He possesses a compelling vision for education and an exceptional ability to motivate others to work toward that vision. He inspires us to strive for excellence while also encouraging our students to embrace learning with enthusiasm. Additionally, Brian has cultivated an undeniable rapport with his colleagues and students alike. He is widely respected by faculty for his collaborative spirit and approaches relationships with absolute sincerity. Students admire him for his ability to connect with them, making them feel valued and understood. This remarkable rapport allows him to lead by example and creates a sense of belonging within our school environment. In conclusion, how much time got it? We strongly believe that Brian Burke should be the next principal at Forest Grove High School. His impressive track record, his dedication to students, and ability to motivate others while remaining humble and approachable make him a valuable asset. We are confident that he will make an excellent principal and continue to advocate for students and staff. Brian is the leader we need, the leader we want, and the leader who will make Forest Grove High School an even better place to learn, teach, and grow. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Travis Toker. I live at 1133 Southeast Brookwood Avenue in Hillsborough. I'm a teacher at Forest Grove High School for the last 9 years. I put my name down to help support Laura in case she ran out of time. We just wanted to reiterate that a large portion of our staff is fully offering our support for Brian Burke in the principal position. He is unaware that we are here and that we have filled out these letters of support for him. So this is not a campaign organized by him, but by the teachers that he has inspired throughout his career at Forest Grove High School. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis. All right, that is everything. Do we have anyone on Zoom for public comment? Okay, that is our public comment section. We are going to move on to consent agenda, and there's kind of an awkwardness to sometimes know if this would be an okay time for people to leave, and it is if you'd like to. But if you'd like to stay and listen to the consent agenda conversation. Welcome,
All the things.
and thank you for coming.
It's a great time to come to school board meeting and hear all the things.
It is. Yeah, welcome anytime. The consent agenda is made up of routine, non-controversial items to be voted on under one motion. Are there any items within the consent agenda a board member or the superintendent wishes to discuss separately? Seeing none. Okay. All in favor? All in favor?
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, passes. No presentations tonight. Action items, we are starting with the transportation RFP with Director Clute. Seems so empty in here.
Good evening. So tonight we don't have any bond items, so that's good.
Shocking.
But we do have the transportation RFP. We started the process early this fall, and so we went through the publishing process and developing the RFP this winter. We did end up having 2 highly qualified firms bid on the RFP process. It does include this would be for our primary services for all home to school routes, all individualized school routes, our McKinney-Vento, our special education, foster, any extended school year programs, after school routes, home to school field trips, athletic trips, so our primary transportation provider. I was just talking with both Brian and Melissa after the budget committee meeting and before this meeting, and we were trying to figure out when we last went out for an RFP, and we're thinking it was 2005. So it's been many years since we've done an RFP for transportation, and we've done a lot of extensions, 5-year extensions. But in talking with them, many districts also, 15 years in between RFPs is pretty consistent, just because of the amount of equipment it's needed to have that contract. But it is time. We do have about 68 buses in our fleet and provide services for 133 student days, plus any weekend events or a lot of summer school opportunities. Overall, based on the 2 quotes that we got, one was from Mid-Columbia Bus and one was from First Student. After looking at and considering cost, the adjustments and impacts, equipment and qualifications, just the quality of the management and the operations, their safety program, technology, all of that, we are recommending to continue to move forward with Mid-Columbia Bus for a 10-year contract with a 5-year extension option at the end of that.
Ellie, I was wondering how come can't see the rates of what the other RFP was for First Student?
I do have the rates. The way we set up our transportation contract is there's a fixed rate for the course of the years divided by the months. So we have our fixed rate with Midco, it is $1,137,270, which should have been on the cover sheet.
Yeah, I'm seeing theirs, I'm just not seeing what First Student has. So I was, usually when you show us an RFP, we get to see both quotes.
Well, there's a little bit of variation in the way the quotes were presented, and so what I tried to do is look at a year's worth of service and apply these rates to what a year's worth of service is. And it's about $321,000 gap between Midco and First Student when I apply all of the overcharges, the daily rates, and their fixed contract.
$321,000 less for Midco.
Correct.
Than First Student.
Yeah.
What is the difference between our last year rates and this one?
I don't have the difference in the annualized rate for Midco today versus, because after we go out for an RFP, we're kind of fixed into that. I just have to build it into the budget. It is an increase compared to what we're spending today, but I don't have that in front of me today.
Yeah, I had just heard, I'll talk to you guys a little bit about this. I've heard from some of your bus drivers that they didn't feel like they were really, like when you guys raised the rates for us, that they're not really feeling like they're seeing that you keep them under a certain hours so they don't really have the benefits, and they weren't getting really a raise, so some of them had left and gone to Hillsborough or other places. So I would just ask that you keep that in mind, how this turns over to your employees, I guess.
Every increase that we get to the contract, the same amount is passed on to the driver, every year.
And there has been years where Midco has adjusted their rates, and then we've done the regular CPI plus an additional amount to account for that. But that's when we would talk together about like how do we want to adjust the rates to be able to have retention? And then we would embed that in a contract amendment that would go over and above the CPI built into the contract. So we still have that option to do and navigate some of those challenges.
And this contract is about 3.5% more than this year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? All right, do I have a motion to award the Student Transportation Services RFP 24-1125 to Mid-Columbia Bus pending final successful contract negotiations?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Hold on real quick. Pending contract negotiations, clarify that for me, please.
So-
With Midco's drivers or with us?
No, just between Midco and us. So the general terms and conditions that I have outlaid in the cover will stay the same. It's just it's the little nuances in the language that we're just finalizing.
Okay,
But
that's what
these-
I was like, wait, are they like negotiating with their drivers and then it can change or?
No, everything's pretty much locked in with the terms and conditions on the cover sheet. Now it's just, we're just fine tuning the contract, so that's why it wasn't attached in full.
Okay, great. That was the only question I had. We can vote.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank
Thank
you, Director Clute. And we are up to the interdistrict transfer process, timeline, and open slots with Dr. West.
Yes. Thank you. This is a second read we brought last time.
Thank you.
Our last board meeting, the transfer timeline, and a number of recommended slots for 25-26 school year. The timeline aligns with our neighboring districts. That is important so that we are all processing our transfer requests at the same time. The open slots for Forest Grove School District are based on recommendations from building principals after review of their current enrollments and projected class sizes per grade, looking at historical data. The recommendation slots available for release from our district is 20, and this aligns with the most recent past practice. So I bring this to the board for action.
Questions? All right, do I have a motion to approve the timeline and recommended slots for the 2025-26 school year as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. And finally, the Forest Grove High School DECA overnight trip request. Thank you, Bethany, for sneaking that into the agenda with Dr. West.
Yes, thank you. So our Forest Grove DECA group has submitted an overnight trip request to attend the International Career and Development Conference in Orlando, Florida. This conference takes place on April 25th through March 1st, so it's at the end of the next month. The objective of this trip is to compete in internationals and attend leadership conferences. The total cost of the trip is $2,000 per leadership student, $1,500 for SBE, and $0 for state champions. So there is some tiered pricing.
What? I know when you read that, it seems, well,
yeah. So there's some tiered costs to those who participate in the conference. And we would like to ask the board to approve this so that our students can attend this conference and competition.
I think they did it last year too, and it was in Anaheim, and Nate, our board rep, went, and he did great and had a great time. I believe that the club pays for it, or they fundraise. I think they have a store where they sell things, right? So I mean, they're paying for all the costs, and it happens in the spring.
Yep.
A couple months. Yeah, I think that was.
April 25th through March 1st is the trip.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, April 25th.
April 1st. The date's not correct.
It is not. It is
It should be April
May
1st.
May 1st. Yep, thank you for that correction.
Maybe let me read it. My only question was just about the cost, but yeah, I had a great time, I think, and lots of things. Is that in Anaheim again this year?
no, it's in
Orlando,
It's in
Florida.
Orlando, and so on their last day of their application, it's Disney World, so I was like, oh, yeah. Anyway, okay.
Last year, Disney World this year?
Yeah, I know. Do I have a motion to approve the Forest Grove High School DECA's overnight trip request to Orlando, Florida from April 24th, 2025 through May 1st, 2025?
So moved.
Second.
All discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right, motion passes. No for three, no information. We've given plenty, and I think we're going to adjourn